Hello everyone, welcome to my week 13 NFL predictions. Last week I did pretty decent and I went 11-5. I got Jags Texans wrong, Browns Broncos wrong, Buccaneers Colts wrong, Rams Cardinals wrong, and Bears Vikings wrong. I nearly got Eagles wrong. I'd say I nearly got Giants wrong. And I guess somewhat I nearly got Bengals wrong. But then again, I also nearly got Vikings right, I nearly got Buccaneers right, and I nearly got Texans right, so that didn't happen. I'm not surprised that the Niners beat us. I did say that it was a no-brainer that the Cowboys would win, but I got my upset of the week right, which was the Packers beating the Lions. I was also right about this being a horrendous game between the Patriots and the Giants. And that pretty much covers last week. So if we get into these games, Thursday night, for God's sake, again, the Seahawks at the Cowboys. Seahawks, we need to fire our offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron, because our defense scored more touchdowns than our offense against the 49ers last week. And they only scored one. They had a pick six. So our offense just can't get going. We have so much talent there. Like our wide receivers, the tight ends, the running backs. The O-line needs work, and Geno Smith is not the guy. We need good quarterbacks because Geno Smith and Drew Lock are not good. Geno, I'd say, is better than Drew Lock, but Drew Lock at one point was like pretty much our only hope because we knew Geno wasn't winning us games, so we just had to hope that Drew Lock could somehow pull a miracle, and he ended up worse. So based on our offense situation, the fact that Cowboys have a great defense, and the fact that last time we played a team that had both a really good offense and a really good defense, we got smacked like 38-3 by the Ravens. So I'm gonna go with the Cowboys. I don't think anyone's gonna be surprised by that. I don't think anyone's gonna disagree. Maybe a couple people will think that an upset will happen, but they'll probably just be like Eagles fans or Giants fans or Commanders fans. I don't know. I don't suspect we'll win. If we do, happy days. I'll be happy that I got this one wrong, but I didn't. Well, I probably won't. So, not looking forward to that, but I'm saying Cowboys win. The next game is the Chargers at the Patriots. Both teams are very underwhelming at the moment. The Chargers have, I think, a fairly high average points per game at the moment, but they're just not winning games. Either their defense does well or their offense does well. There's no both, really. And it's their head coach situation with Staley. He needs to go. He needs to go. I don't know how he hasn't been sacked yet, but he's still got the job somehow. He needs to go if Chargers want things to change. But I think they will win because the Patriots are just as bad. Mac Jones sucks. He had, I think, before he was benched against the Giants, 80 total yards and 2 interceptions. 50% completion rate. Their quarterback situation is horrendous. Their offense does almost nothing except maybe having a fairly decent, somewhat decent run game. But their receivers aren't that great either. Their defense isn't doing enough. I mean, like, they still lost to the... I mean, they only allowed Giants to score 10, but they still lost. They lost to a Giants team that scored 10. And even when they had like a 33, 35-yard field goal attempt to tie it and send it to overtime, they missed. So, I'm going to go with the Chargers. They're just more stable than the Patriots. The Patriots need to start tanking because it is not looking good. They might be the worst team in the league, even worse than the Panthers at the moment. The next game is the Colts at the Titans. An AFC South matchup. And the Titans, honestly, they're they're looking fairly weak. They seem to be getting weaker each week. They're just regressing. Meanwhile, the Colts, I think they're sneaking up. They're sneaking past everyone. They're in the wild card spot at the moment, and they're definitely contending for that. They're going to be contending for that wild card spot come the end of the season, because they've got a winning record. They're 6-5 at the moment, even with Anthony Richardson out. I think when Anthony Richardson comes back next season, the Colts are actually going to do a bit better. But the Colts are not looking bad as of now, anyways, even without him. They're a sneaky, decent team. I'm gonna pick them to win over the Titans. I don't trust the Titans at the moment. Will Levis, he was so good for one game, and it was against the Falcons, and then they've just been on the decline ever since, and it's not looked good for them. So I'm gonna go with the Colts. I just trust them more. The next game is the Dolphins at the Commanders. The Dolphins are on a, I think, 2-game win streak at the moment. And yes, there's this thing about them only losing to that, like not being able to beat teams over 500 and only beating teams with 500 or less. But I mean, that's the same situation for the Cowboys. Although they'll probably beat us, we have a winning record. So that will change. No, we're tied. No, yeah, we do have a winning record at the moment. So that will probably change. But the Commanders have a losing record, and if this curse stays with the Dolphins, they should win this. The Commanders haven't looked that great recently either. The only time recently I think that they've looked decent was when they played against us. And that's just because we played bad, I think. Sam Howell, I think, is somewhat underrated, but it's not enough for the Commanders. They started 2-0, and since then they've gone 2-8. Since week 2, they are 2-8. That is not good for them. They've got to start stepping it up. But I don't think it will happen against the Dolphins. They're too good of a team. Even if people say they can't beat good teams, the Dolphins are still a really good team. They thrashed the Broncos, and well, the Broncos have started making a comeback with their record. They're 6-5 at the moment. They've got a winning record now. They've won their last 5. So I'm gonna go with the Dolphins. The next game is the Cardinals at the Steelers. The Cardinals didn't look all that competitive against the Rams. I mean, they did in like the first quarter when they got a touchdown and 2-point conversion to take the lead, surprisingly. Although I feel like it's a very Arizona thing to score 8 points on the first touchdown. I don't know, I just feel like I see it a lot. But after that, it was just wraps. The Rams just curb stomped them. You know, the Steelers, in the first game, after firing Matt Canada, they put up over 400 yards of offense, and Kenny Pickett had a near 270-yard passing game. Their defense is still good. Their offense is starting to pick it up as well. They've got good running backs. They've got great receivers. I think now Steelers could prove that they're worthy of the record. And it was Matt Canada that was the problem all along. I mean, I think everyone knew that he was the problem. But now that they can prove their worth, I think they'll go to 8-4 with a win over Arizona. The next game is the Falcons at the Jets. The Falcons have started using, Arthur Smith has started using Bijan Robinson more, and it's paying off. Their defense held the Saints. I mean, it's not saying much saying this because, the Saints don't have a particularly great offense, but the Falcons still held the Saints to only scoring field goals. Granted, they allowed them to get in field goal range to score 5 field goals, but the Falcons had intercepted them and got a pick 6 out of it. They used Bijan Robinson right. Their defense was holding them back a bit. In a divisional game as well, that's pretty tough. And they're going to be going up against the Jets, so I think Tim Boyle is still going to be starting. I actually don't know if Tim Boyle is starting, but the alternative is Zach Wilson, and he was probably benched for a reason. And they did not look good against the Dolphins at all. The Hail Mary now is a name because of the 96 yard pick six that was it Javon Holland had. So I think the Falcons are just a better team, although it is the Falcons, and with their history, they lose games they shouldn't. Whether it's against a team that's probably worse than them, supposed to be worse than them, or if it's a comeback. So I'm going to go with the Falcons because it's against the Jets and it's in MetLife, so someone on the Falcons team will probably somehow get injured. But I'm going to go with the Falcons. The next game is the Panthers at the Buccaneers. At this point, I'm becoming more and more tempted to pick against the Buccaneers. But it's against the Panthers. I think I'll let them off this time. I'm going to pick them to win. They nearly made a comeback against the Colts last week. But the fact that they had to try to make a comeback at all should say enough. They need to step it up. They have talent on that team. Sorry. They have talent, but they're not utilizing it. I trust Baker Mayfield. I like the receivers. I like their running game. They're supposed to have a good defense. I think it's probably the coaching that's the problem for the Bucs. Because they can put up points and they can probably win games. But it's what they're doing isn't that. I think something has to change in Tampa. But if they do well, then I don't think the background team, I guess, are gonna start needing some changes because it's against the Panthers, who haven't looked good almost at all this season. They put up 10 points against the Titans last week, and they couldn't quite get the conversion on fourth down on their last play. So I'm gonna go with Tampa, and we'll see how that goes. I won't actually be that surprised if Carolina win though. The next game is the Lions at the Saints. Both teams were pretty disappointing last week. They both need redemption, but I only think one of them is going to get it, and I think that'll be the Lions. I got my upset of the week right last week, but I think with the loss against the Packers, that they're going to try and step it up. I think they're going to be a lot more focused, a lot more competitive. Goff has had a rough past month or so, month and a half. And the Lions, they've been allowing a fair amount of points on their defense as well. So their defense needs to step it up. So does their quarterback. And the Saints, their offense is pretty disappointing too. They got a pick six against them last week against the Falcons. I think the Lions are just better, and I think they'll get the win. The next game is the Broncos at the Texans. Both of these teams at 6-5. If you told someone last season that they'll both be 6-5 by this point in the season, they probably would have lost their minds. The Broncos are on a 5-game winning streak, and the Texans got screwed over by the refs against the Jags. And they nearly, just barely, couldn't tie the game at the end of regular time. The field goal bounced off the upright, and they were just inches away from being able to tie it and send it to overtime. But the Broncos are on a 5-game win streak, and no team this season has gone further than a 5-game win streak. The Jags had theirs disrupted. The Vikings had theirs disrupted by the Broncos, no less. But I don't know if any team is gonna have more than a 5-game win streak, except maybe with like the elites like Chiefs, 49ers, or Eagles. Eagles actually probably do have a 5-game win streak. I mean, like more wild card teams like the Vikings, like the Jags are a decent team, but still, you wouldn't completely expect them to be have a 5-game win streak. But I'm gonna pick the Texans. I really like CJ Stroud, and I think this is actually going to be a fairly entertaining game with CJ Stroud against Russell Wilson. Their offenses have been lighting it up recently. Not to mention their defenses have showed some solidarity there as well. So I think Texans will just about be able to win. And I'm also going to go one step further and say this goes to overtime. Yeah, I'm going to say it's an overtime win for Houston. The next game is the Browns at the Rams. I got both of these teams' games wrong last week, just like I did with Broncos and Texans. But the Rams' offense did pretty decent, although that's not saying too much considering it was against the Cardinals' defense. But the Browns have a significantly better defense than the Rams. Although on the flip side, their offense isn't looking too good considering Thompson Robinson, their third quarterback, got concussed, so he might still be on concussion protocol. And Amari Cooper had some sort of injury, I think, or concussion last week against the Broncos. And that really slowed them down. The Rams look more stable than the Browns at the moment, just injury-wise. I don't know if the Browns' defense is going to be enough for the Rams. But honestly, I have no clue who to pick here. And for the second time this season, the second time also including the Browns in it, I'm going to pick a tie. I don't understand why people don't pick ties more often because if you get it right, then it's really impressive. But I think somehow, someway, this makes sense. I think Broncos-Texans tying also makes sense. But I feel like Texans will just be able to squeeze that one out. So I'm gonna pick Browns Rams to tie. And I have no idea how that's gonna go. It'll be pretty funny if I got it right. But I wouldn't be surprised if I got it wrong. I don't think anyone would be. It's very bold, but I don't know who to pick otherwise, so I'll go with a tie. The next game, the game that's definitely getting televised over Browns, Rams, and Broncos, Texans, the 49ers at the Eagles. 49ers recently have been looking like their old selves from earlier in the season. The Eagles have been not looking too convincing despite what their record is saying. And I don't know if this will be an upset. Record-wise, it would be an upset, but I don't think... I think the majority of the people who predict these games, I think most of them would agree with me. I'm going to pick the 49ers. They've just looked too strong with their defense, their O-line, their receivers, their quarterback, Brock Purdy. Their offense has been on fire, their defense even better. And I think that's just been... they've just looked a lot stronger than the Eagles recently. The Eagles struggled to beat the Bills last week. And they also struggled against the Cowboys a few weeks ago. Also struggled against the Commanders a few weeks ago. They've been struggling with a few of these teams that they should be beating in the past few weeks. Meanwhile, the Niners recently have been sweeping everyone since their bye week. So I'm going to pick the 49ers. I wouldn't be too surprised if the Eagles win, but I'd be less surprised if the Niners won. So I'm going to pick the Niners. The Sunday night game is the Chiefs at the Packers. The Packers getting an upset victory over the Lions last week. My upset of the week, and it was right. And the Chiefs, who beat the Raiders by, 17 points? Did they shut them out in the second half? I can't quite remember. But the Chiefs actually scored in the second half. So I think their offense is going to start picking it up a bit more. And I think this is a great game for them to start getting ready for their their playoff games and start playing like themselves when they're in the playoffs, because somehow they thrive in the playoffs. I think this is gonna start. They're gonna start picking it up and so they can start leading with that example into the playoffs. So I'm gonna pick the Chiefs. I think they're just gonna prove themselves to be better than the Packers in almost every aspect. Their defense is pretty good. Their offense just needs to step it up a bit, and that's what they did last week. I think they'll do it again this week, and I think they'll start getting the ball rolling again and start racking up some more wins. I'll go with Chiefs. And the final game, Monday night, is the Bengals at the Jaguars. The Battle of the Cats, just like when the Lions played the Panthers earlier this season. The Bengals losing to the Steelers, but only by 6. Honestly, I thought the Steelers would have won by more, considering they had a really good offense game, and the Bengals had a backup quarterback. But Bengals still only held them to 16. They still lost, but it was only by 6. So I think their defense must be doing fairly well. Meanwhile, the Jaguars barely scraping a victory against the Texans last week, needing some help from the referees. But at the moment, I still think Jags are the better team. However, if we're going based on last week's performances, I would pick the Bengals. And I really don't actually know who to pick here. Normally I have them written down so that I know who I'm picking. And I had the Jags originally, but now I'm doubting myself. I actually don't know who to pick. I think I'll pick the quote-unquote safer option here, and I will go with the Jags. I don't have full trust in that at all. The Bengals can certainly win, but I think the Jags certainly have... They have more potential at the moment than the Bengals, so I'm going to go with Jags. That's going to wrap up my Week 13 predictions. Hope you all enjoyed. Go Hawks, and until next time, goodbye and have a nice day.